Yeah, you guys might be a little close if you run out now, but.
I'm going to go carrying it live. If you guys have to do that, do what you have to do, right?
Yeah, fusion.
But
Oh, we've got one more set up, so you might have another minute.
Yeah, the other ones are fine. But they are basically all market.
Right.
They're all like a little retail.
I need two. You guys need the legs down?
The wall's an advantage there, but also is anyone going in? Like, I mean,
Let's just use the mics here.
throw down money ahead of time.
So take the mic up here.
Maybe my iPhone 4 time done.
I'll just use the small one. Here you go. Chris? Son of a gun.
I don't know why I'm using mine. I just switched it one day. And, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, whatever's in the bag.
Well, that's why I have my.
Hey guys, we're gonna start here.
All working for you?
Test, test, test.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. We are today in the midst of a number of meetings. Myself and our Minister of Trade and Export Development, Warren Keating, as well as our Minister of Agriculture, Daryl Harrison, engaging with the industries that are creating jobs, creating wealth, and creating opportunity in communities right across Saskatchewan to fully understand and to ensure that the provincial government fully understands the impacts of not only the uncertainty of the three proposed types of U.S. tariffs on Saskatchewan industries and Saskatchewan families, but also the impact of the imposed Chinese tariffs, specifically on canola oil and canola meal, and what that means for our ag value-added processing industry moving forward, particularly our canola crush industry moving forward. What we are seeing with respect to these engagement sessions and what they are focused on is how can we ensure that the provincial government is best representing the opportunities that we have in Saskatchewan and thereby best representing Saskatchewan families. One is an understanding that various levels of government and industry as well have a role to play as we work our way through this conversation, whether it be with our Canadian government, whether it be with the government in the United States of America at whatever level, or whether it be abroad in countries and markets like China. First and foremost, I think it's important to identify that our federal government is the level of government that will engage directly, whether it be with China or whether it be with the United States of America. And we encourage them to do so. And they have been working with the federal government, most notably today, I think Minister Champagne and Minister LeBlanc are in Washington, D.C. alongside Premier Doug Ford, and we encourage more of that engagement as we find our way through this conversation. With respect to China, we need to have urgent engagement by the federal government with the country of China, showing a willingness to find a path through and a path away from the tariffs that are being imposed on canola meal and canola oil. This needs to happen before any election call. There needs to be action by our federal government before any election call to engage with China to ensure that the canola industry is not left in purgatory during the time that we might find ourselves in an election. That legacy of closed canola crush, plants, canola crush facilities across Saskatchewan and across Canada would be the Liberal government's to wear, and we would strongly hope that that is not the case. We heard this morning, with respect to Minister Champagne talking about this very topic, the retaliatory tariffs from China, to the Canadian tariff on Chinese EVs, which was a tariff on EVs that literally no one is buying in Canada. But we heard Minister Champagne's quotes, and I do quote him from this morning: we want to protect our industries, we want to protect our workers, and we want to protect our communities. The same holds true for Western Canada, I would hope, as a federal politician representing the Liberal Party going into an election and asking for Canadian support again. We would ask Minister Champagne and the entirety of the Liberal government to represent canola industry workers in Saskatchewan and across Canada. We would ask Minister Champagne and the Liberal government to represent Saskatchewan communities where the canola industry is paramount in how we create wealth in our families, and represent the canola industry more broadly by engaging with China immediately in an effort to have these tariffs removed from such an important industry that's creating wealth for Saskatchewan and Canadian families. The provincial government also has a role to play, whether it be with the United States of America or even with countries like China or countries where we have most certainly an exporting interest. We need to advocate and to educate as to what the impacts of these ill-conceived decisions are by foreign governments, and at times educate and advocate with our own federal government with respect to what the impacts of decisions that they are making are. Right now, we have 5 challenges ahead of us in Saskatchewan. The first 3 are from the USA, the fentanyl and the border security tariffs of 25% and 10% on various items. The second would be the tariffs that are in place today, the steel and aluminum tariffs, which have an impact on Canadian and, yes, Saskatchewan businesses and families. The third would be the reciprocal tariffs that are poised to come into place on April the 2nd. And we need to advocate and educate the United States of American government on what the impacts of those tariffs are, not only on American families, but on the broader effort and initiative of North American energy and food security, as well as manufacturing security. The fourth challenge that we have as Canadian industries, Canadian families, and Canadian people is the threat of counter-tariffs. And those are specifically designed to financially impact and impact in the jobs that are in our nation, impact Canadians, not necessarily directly Americans. And fifth, and equally as important as the first 4, and probably the most urgent for the province of Saskatchewan, and in the case of seafood, the seafood counter-tariff, Atlantic Canadians as well, is the Chinese counter-tariff to the federal government's decision to appease the previous president with respect to the tariff on Chinese EVs. We would ask the federal government and Minister Champagne to stand by his words, to represent all Canadian workers, to represent all Canadian communities, and to represent all Canadian industries that are creating wealth. And we will continue to advocate not only with him, but with other parties as well, as we do find ourselves on the path to an election in this nation, on the path ultimately to some certainty on who is going to lead us through the course of the next 4 years, and to negotiate not only with the American president, but to negotiate with other export markets around the world. But we would ask the Liberal government, in the interests of Canadians that live in the province of Saskatchewan, across Western Canada, and I would say across the nation, they need to engage with the Chinese government to show a signal that they are ready to negotiate and to find a path to a non-tariff environment, or the legacy of closed industries and shuttered industries will be theirs throughout the campaign. Anything to add? We just say we would close in thanking the industries that have engaged and provided guidance to the provincial government this morning, and many more coming this afternoon.
Have you spoken to Mark Carney yet? And what is your reaction? Obviously, we'll have a new prime minister.
Yeah, we'll probably have 3. There's probably 3 this year.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, sorry.
We likely have 3 this year.
Well, it's possible.
It is.
Sorry, my question was, have you spoken to Mr. Carney? What is your reaction? Obviously, you clashed, or you had differences with the previous Prime Minister Trudeau. What is your reaction to his election? And are you more hopeful for a better relationship between Saskatchewan, especially at this time and with respect to trade?
First, I would say congratulations to Mr. Carney on winning the leadership race. I understand he's going to be installed as our Prime Minister tomorrow. And so congratulations on that as well. And I look forward to working with him for the period of time that he chooses until he calls an election. But he has some things that he needs to do, and he needs to hit the ground running, most certainly. I would say paramount and first of those things is to provide a plan on the 5 tariff topics that I have outlaid here today. 3 with the United States government. He needs to engage with the Chinese government immediately. Immediately. I noticed this morning already that his first planned international visit is to the European Union. Not good. Not good. We don't have a trade war with the European Union today. We are in the midst of a trade war with the United States of America and China, the 2 largest economies in the world and our two largest export markets and trading partners. To choose to go to the European Union is beyond what I could understand as being in any way impactful or representing Canadians. And so I would ask Mr. Carney to reconsider that, engage immediately with the Chinese government, continue and engage and lay his plan out with respect to how he is going to engage with the United States of America. And I would suggest that plan should not include anything in the way of export tariffs, because that is very much one of the threats that has been identified by Saskatchewan industry as being one of the 5 tariff-related threats that are going to end jobs for a period of time in this country, and ultimately are not in any way finding our way towards that North American energy and food security goal that Saskatchewan really plays a part in.
Can you elaborate on what you said yesterday? You said it in the next, if the Chinese tariffs go through in a week, that it would decimate the canola industry in Saskatchewan. Can you elaborate on that statement?
Yeah, it'll close crushing plants. I can't be more clear. And the people that will be working those plants will not have a job for a period of time. More impactful than that. And I would really hope that anyone that is running for the Liberal Party of Canada or any party in the next election listens to these next words. More impactful than a temporary loss of jobs in the canola crush industry is the markets that we are losing. The markets that we are losing are going to be they were incredibly hard to build in the first place, and they're going to be incredibly hard to regain. And so I don't know that those jobs will immediately come back. This is the reason that I ask Prime Minister-designate Carney to reach out, make his first engagement with the government of China to find a way through these very, very disastrous counter-tariffs that have been implemented that are going to have an impact on Western Canadian families.
Do you feel other premiers are on board with you in terms of making China the first priority?
Well, I've laid out 5 priorities. 3 of those are from the United States of America. I've spent about half of my time or better this last month in the United States of America. If I felt I could be on the ground in China and make a difference, I certainly would do that. And those are some questions that we're asking folks that we're meeting with here today that represent employers across and job creators across Saskatchewan. But who can make a difference and who the expectation, I think, of Canadians to engage with the second largest economy in the world and an important export market for Canadians would be the leader of our federal government. And that is going to happen tomorrow with Mr. Carney when he becomes our Prime Minister. That should be his first phone call. He should be laying out on all 5 topics what his plan is moving forward, how you're going to negotiate and find a path with the United States of America. Japan did. Taiwan did. Mexico is very much hunting for a path to agreement with the President of the United States of America, and I would hope that our Prime Minister-elect is looking for a similar path. The goal here is not who wins or loses. The goal here is to have a free and fair trading environment with the largest economies in the world. That's the expectation of the federal government. I say that would be the expectation of Mr. Carney when he's installed as our Prime Minister tomorrow.
Just to ask you on steel and aluminum tariffs, those are now in place. Have you been talking to the Saskatchewan industry, and could you touch on the importance of steel and aluminum provincially? There's a lot of focus of it in the Eastern Canada. Could you talk about the industry in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, no, we have engaged very closely with the industry, and I invited a number of them to the meetings throughout today as well, so that they can provide us some guidance. I said yesterday we're looking at every opportunity that we have provincially, using whether it be the strength of our economy or what that might be to support the steel industry in the province, as that is the industry that is experiencing and has tariffs implemented on them right now today. The rest are looking at likely an April 2nd or maybe even an earlier implementation date. Changes day by day, as everything does in this conversation. So we're in active discussions with the steel industry and how we can keep people employed in that industry during what is a very tumultuous time, and a time where certainty just isn't an opportunity that we have.
Are you aware of any job losses already in Saskatchewan steel industry, or any impact already coming down the pipe?
I am not. Have you?
Not yet.
You guys have been, you three especially, I suppose, have been racking up the air miles the last few months. If you wouldn't mind, just outside of the U.S., just telling me some of these places you've traveled to form other trade relationships and strengthen the ones that we currently have in the face of these tariffs.
Yeah, and as I said yesterday, we have a number of goals here. One is to have a free and fair trade environment with all of our largest trading partners, and I'll ask Warren and Daryl to comment on the markets that they've been in the last number of weeks. So first is to not have tariffs present. Second, if they are present, is to have them removed as quickly as possible. Third is to even further diversify our market, so we are not even as reliant as we are today on one market in the world. That being said, in Saskatchewan, we can be so fortunate to have the challenge of increasing. Since we formed government, I talked yesterday of our export value being $17 billion, climbing up. Last 3 years has been in that $45 to $50 billion range. It virtually tripled, or even a little more in the last decade and a half. Those products and the value of those products are providing energy and food security for over 160 countries around the world. 10 of those countries are, I would say, significant export markets for us. Number one is the United States of America. Number two is China. But there's India, there's Indonesia, there's the Netherlands, there's Mexico has over $1 billion of Canadian products flowing into their country in the under the USMCA agreement that we have. And so I would say the focus of this government has always been, how do we have a presence in these markets to, one, protect our market share, two, to be on the ground where there's opportunities to grow that market share. And right now, that second point is very paramount. And that's why we had made an effort to visit largely, not all, but largely the significant markets where we have a trade office presence in the lead up to this spring, given the urgency of the three potentially imposed tariffs from the United States, the very significant tariff that's being imposed from China, and ultimately the threat of what counter-tariffs would do to Saskatchewan industry and Saskatchewan families. And so, Minister Kading, if you want, you were in a couple of markets this spring, if you want to comment on that, and then Minister Harrison as well.
So we have 9 international trade offices around the world. I was in 2 of them a couple of weeks ago, Vietnam and Singapore. Interesting, what we found in both of those areas is certainly a move towards food security and energy security. However, both of those areas define those differently. And I think it was so important for us to be there to understand ultimately how they're defining them and how we can support them in both of those key areas. So, we've got 9 different regions this year that hit over $1 billion that we exported into. So that's the strength of growth that we have in this province, and we're certainly looking at trying to expand that even more.
Sorry, Minister Kading, just a question on the canola tariffs on China cover value-added crops. Could you talk about seed has been left off, has been left off that? Could you talk about, and some analysts have been observing and saying there could be a small silver lining in that canola seed demand in China could increase as a result of less value-added product going in there. Do you have any thoughts or analysis on that?
Well, my thoughts are of our crushing industry that's evolved and developed here in Saskatchewan. We've got multi-billion dollars invested in capital in the canola crush industry. So I think that's our biggest concern, is ultimately how is it going to affect the crush industry and the jobs and ultimately the value of canola that goes with it. I mean, that's what we're seeing now. Canola is one of the most valuable commodities that producers have on their production list this year, and all of a sudden we're looking at that now being in the red ink as well. So I think the value really to us is canola in general, what it means to our ag producers, but ultimately what it means to our canola crush industry, which is evolving and expanding on a regular basis here. In fact, we've got a new crush plant that was hoping to come online here very shortly, and I'm concerned about them and the viability of them coming to the marketplace now with all of these tariffs implemented both on the U.S. side and certainly into China as well.
Daryl, and your international.
Yes, thanks. Certainly attending and bringing opening remarks to the Pulses Conclave in New Delhi was very welcoming. India is a very important market. We have a trade office there on the ground, and day to day their work is very much appreciated. It maintains and grows that market. They're a growing country. Their standard of living is increasing, and their demand for protein is high. And we want to not only maintain that, but we want to grow it. We don't want to lose any ground in that market, because once you lose it, it's tougher to get back. Over in the United Arab Emirates, it's certainly a trade hub for that part of the world. They've set themselves up well, and that's a very important, because it's going to be one of our fastest growing markets anywhere in the world. So we always got to maintain those and grow them, and also search out new markets as well.
All good?
Premier, what stories did you hear from businesses this morning, and what did you tell them?
What we talked about was essentially the 5 challenging potential tariffs that we have in front of us. Some in place, some the threat of the tariff being in place. 3 from the U.S., the fentanyl border security tariff, I would call it. 2 would be the aluminum steel tariff, which is in place. 3 would be the reciprocal tariffs. The 4th challenge would be any retaliatory tariffs that might come from our own federal government in the way of export tariffs or tariffs directly on Canadian business and families. And then the last, and likely the most urgent conversation, at least I would hope that the federal government would view this as the most urgent conversation, is the Chinese counter-tariff on not only canola products but seafood as well as pork. The federal government does need, and what we heard this morning in particular from the agricultural industry, is there's boats in transport to China that are now trying to find a new home. There is a real urgency, and I think you will see associations calling for this urgent action of the federal government prior to any election call to engage with China and signal that Canadian government is going to work with the Chinese government to find a path forward on a free and fair trading environment. The same path forward, I think, has been coming together when it comes to the 3 threats that we have south of the border. We're hearing various political leaders talk about dollar-for-dollar tariffs. They're 10 times, the economy in the U.S. is 10 times our size. If you think you're going to stare down that economy, you might not get the result that you are looking for, and we heard that from industry. There needs to be a path forward that provides us as Canadian industries with the free and fair trading environment that we have been able to have access to on both sides of the border for literally not only decades now, but in excess of a century. And so, as I said, what was really quantified and solidified for me in the meetings this morning is the role that the federal government has to play. They are our federal government. They do represent us as Saskatchewan industries and Saskatchewan families and Saskatchewan residents, and the expectation is that they would do so, whether it be in the American market or whether it be with the Chinese government. Those are the 2 largest economies in the world. We as an exporting province, and I would say largely we as an exporting nation, expect the federal government to do so, and we ask them urgently to engage prior to calling any election. Cancel your trip to Europe if you need to, Mr. Carney. There are higher stakes at play here. There's Canadian jobs at play, and there's Canadian careers at play.
Are you seeing any evidence that Saskatchewan's diplomatic efforts are bearing fruit?
Yes, and then we discussed that as well with respect to the role that a subnational government or a provincial government can play in engaging, for example, in the American market at any level that we can to ensure that anyone in the policy-making world understands the impacts of certain policy decisions. Impacts on American families, but also the impact on the broader goal of ensuring that we have energy security. For example, in $10 to $15 billion of Saskatchewan oil, which is all of it, finds its way to refineries largely throughout the Midwest in places like Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin. Those refineries are very specifically tooled to refine a percentage of a lighter American oil, but also Western Canadian heavy crude. You can't just replace that heavy crude content with lighter American oil. You need that heavy crude content. You need that Western Canadian oil in those refineries in order for them to provide the end product that American families put in their vehicles. And I think that's largely why you saw a reduction from 25 to 10% in the initial tariff proposal on the fentanyl border tariffs by the president, is because the transition to exclude Western Canadian energy just simply wasn't possible. That comes through education, that comes through advocacy, often of not only industry, but subnational provincial governments like myself. Admittedly, in China, that's maybe a little bit more difficult just with the structure of government that they have, but we may have some opportunities to engage from a province-to-province level, and we have done that in the past. And so anything that we can do as a subnational government, whether it be in the United States, in China, or, as I said, expanding our market opportunities in a number of other markets. We have many that are over $1 billion of exports today in our trade relationship. We want to do that as well, and that's why we have been to a number of those markets in the last month.
You mentioned the possibility of 3 prime ministers. Do you see a distinction between what you're hearing from Pierre Poilievre on trade and Mark Carney? I mean, it seems to me that they're both talking about retaliatory tariffs and that, but you probably listened closer than I have. Are you hearing anything more encouraging? And would you ever suggest that, I mean, we're 12 days away from Parliament resuming, I think, today, or something like that, 11, 12 days, and the opposition parties have said they're going to defeat the government at the first opportunity. Would you ever support an extension of that to try to solve the China tariffs thing or tariffs issue? Or
well, 12 days is certainly enough time for Mr. Carney to reach out to the Chinese government and to actually show what his ministers said is they want to represent Canadians. 12 days is certainly enough time for Mr. Carney as Prime Minister and his cabinet to meet and to chart a path forward, not only with the Chinese government so that we don't have these tariffs, we don't have these job losses in Saskatchewan and Canadian communities. If we find our way into an election campaign and we see canola crush facilities closing down in Saskatchewan, that's the legacy of the Liberal government. That is on them. If they do not reach out to the Chinese government and try, at least make every attempt to have these tariffs removed and to make policy decisions that will have them removed. As I said earlier this week, there's decisions that were made to protect or tariffs that were applied to prevent cars from coming into Canada that no one wants. To protecting the industry, a North American EV industry that few can afford. And in doing so, the impacts of these 100% tariffs on canola are going to impact Canadians with job loss. And it's going to happen in weeks, not months.
Spring sitting is just a few days away from the budget, 6 days. So with all of this going on, what are you hoping to accomplish during the spring sitting of the legislature? And are you planning any more trips to the U.S. during that time?
We'll see with respect to engagement in the U.S. I'm thinking in my mind, I think there is some discussion of the potential of a First Minister's meeting in the next number of days. And I can't think of one that we have planned to the U.S., but we will. I'd have to check what's coming up in the next period of time. But largely, you'll see me in Regina in the Legislative Assembly as session does begin. I would say largely what you will see in the spring budget is us delivering on the commitments that we made in the speech from the throne and the campaign last fall. We are a government that when we do make a commitment, we have every intention of delivering on that commitment on behalf of the people that we represent across this province. And in this case, and it really leads us to the importance of today's discussion, advocating and meeting with industry leaders, employers, exporters. We use the strength of the Saskatchewan economy to make those investments that you're going to see in the budget in just under a week. Those investments are going to be focused on ensuring that Saskatchewan remains the most affordable province in Canada to live. Those investments, when it comes to healthcare, are going to be focused on taking steps to ensure that every Saskatchewan resident has access to a healthcare provider. We're at 84% of Saskatchewan residents have access today. That's above the national average, but we need to do better. We're going to be taking steps to ensure that every Saskatchewan resident has access to a surgery in a reasonable amount of time, and we're increasing the number of surgeries, on track to do 100,000 this year, which would build on the 95,000 we had last year, which was a record year. When it comes to education, focusing on investing in our students who are our children and grandchildren, in particular in that K-3 space, and expecting outcomes to improve when it comes to what our grade 3 children, our students, are achieving at that grade 3 level. And we know the opportunities for success and the path to success when you can read, write, and add at a grade 3 level upon completion of grade 3. Grades 4 through 12 become much more positive experience and create much more opportunity for those students. And last but not least, we are going to be making every investment and taking every opportunity to ensure that the communities where we live are safe. That is going to have a focus on expanding the recovery opportunities and the access to recovery opportunities, whether it's the capacity of recovery, addiction recovery beds that we have, whether it's the gateways to access those beds, whether it be through a complex needs shelter, whether it be through an urgent care center, of which we are expanding. But we're also going to be taking every opportunity to increase the consequences for people that are bringing drugs, in particular fentanyl and crystal meth, into our communities. These are no more evident than right here in Saskatoon, where we had PEOC has stood up their operations as of this morning alongside the city of Saskatoon to support the fire, all of our first responders, and to support all of those folks, and most importantly to support families that may have a loved one that is living with addictions, to find our way through this crisis in this city right now with the dirty drugs and the dirty poison that are on our streets. And we need to get them out of the hands of the drug dealers. We need to get that poison out of their hands, and we need to get the drug dealers off our streets. And so enforcement very much is part of our focus in ensuring that our communities are safe moving forward.
How does activating that emergency operations center, differ from what the province was able to do before in regards to that overdose crisis that's happening right now?
So what it does, and Warren, you might have a little bit to add to this just with your previous history, but what it does really is supports all of the, not only the provincial, the provincial organizations that we have, in supporting the city of Saskatoon, but really supports the organization of the entities in Saskatoon, whether it be the law enforcement, the Saskatoon City Police, whether it be the fire department, whether it be the ambulatory care that we have, in ensuring that, one, we are saving lives, two, we are making every effort to remove this tainted poison from the streets of Saskatoon. And I'd just say that our Minister of Justice and Policing, Tim McLeod, has been working closely with the Cynthia Block, the Mayor of Saskatoon, on this, and we're going to continue to work with the city of Saskatoon in supporting the entities and organizations here that are on the very front lines of a toxic, poisonous drug crisis in our province's largest city.
Is your government declaring this an emergency?
I think there's some levels that PEOC actually. To declare something an emergency is actually a very operational, an operational term. And so whether it be, forest fire in the north, whether it be flooding in a community, or whether it be a toxic drug that has entered our community like it is in Saskatoon, I would leave the declarations of emergencies to the professionals, whether that be in the Saskatchewan Public Safety Commission, or whether it be the Saskatoon Police Service, whoever that is.
Does that mean, just going back to your previous answer, does that mean that additional agencies or resources are moving into Saskatoon to assist fire, police, and some of these frontline services?
Yeah, what the Provincial Emergency Operations Center really does is support the organization of what is happening each and every day. And so whether there are asks of, let's, for example, say the Saskatoon Police Service has an ask for a certain number of resources or whatever that might be. There may be some provincial opportunities to provide that resource, or maybe someone else that's involved with the daily PEOC organization that's able to provide that resources. And really, so what it is doing, like we do in times of, crises in other areas of the province, fires, floods, unfortunate incidents on our highways and such. We had one, at James Smith, not that long ago. Is really an organization of the entirety of resources we have, whether those resources be municipal in nature, whether they be provincial in nature, and we also have the ability to reach out federally if need be. Yeah.
Just to switch back to trade and trade diversification in particular, obviously for agricultural markets there's a lot of room for growth, but for commodities such as steel and oil, would you say that the ability to diversify those markets is a little more limited due to some factors, due to like geography and such? Are you able to talk on that?
No, I would say that we actually have every opportunity to expand, not only steel, but the forestry industry, as well as a number of others here in the province. But in order to do so, we need market access. We need that free and fair trading environment. We are a province of exporters. We often talk about food, fuel, and fertilizer, but there's the entirety of a periphery of opportunities around that. For example, steel. We have had, over the last 10 years or so, I would say the largest interprovincial trade barrier that we have seen has been our inability to build significant infrastructure from coast to coast in this nation, so that, for example, Canadians have the inability to buy Canadian oil to fuel their vehicles and to heat their homes. That shouldn't be. And it's entirely due to federal policy as to why that is the case. There's literally hundreds of millions of dollars that were invested in an Energy East pipeline, which Bill C-69 did not provide the environment and stopped that pipeline in its tracks. We saw policy developments with respect to the West Coast that stopped the Northern Gateway project, and I would say that both should be looked at with increased vigor from either this federal government or the next. I would go even further than that. When it comes to us, and look at the steel opportunities that were lost in each of those cases, but when it comes to what we do as Canadians, and more specifically what we do as Saskatchewan industries and where we work, we are an exporting province, and I would say there should be a renewed vigor, and I would hope there's a renewed vigor on behalf of all Canadians to look at ports, pipes, and rail. And not only the infrastructure challenges and laying out, and I would ask any new federal government to look at long term as to what the infrastructure investment is going to look like and where that is going to come from. Whether it's increasing capacity at the Port of Vancouver or Prince Rupert, or whether it's looking at investing in our military, and some of that would be in icebreakers to ensure the port of the Port of Churchill could actually be a viable port, not only for ag products, but for energy products as well. I would say that we need to look at this also from an operational perspective. Not only a policy perspective on approving pipelines and approving port expansions and approving investments, for example, in military icebreakers to keep ports open, but also to keep secure our Arctic, but an investment in ensuring that the operations of our rail lines and our ports are uninterrupted, so that we can be the reliable supplier of food, fuel, and fertilizer for years into the future. All of that bodes well for those peripheral industries like the steel and aluminum industry. All of that bodes well for the forestry industry, as well as the general construction industries across not only Saskatchewan but the nation. And so we need to look at things differently. And I would say that ports, pipe, and rail need to be part of the conversation of all Canadians' conversation as we move forward. And our policy development needs to be in support of not only enhancing the infrastructure, but ensuring that the operations in those three spaces are seamless.
Thanks, everyone.